They've taken similar paths in life. The difference between the villain and the hero is the villain took one step in the wrong direction. The closer you can make the villain to the hero, the more effective you have a villain. And to be honest with you, really, what also makes the book, what makes the story, is the villain.
It takes a short time to create a hero. Okay, you've created the hero, you have the hero. Now, he's set. But the villains, you've got to be working on them all the time. Every month, it's got to be a new one. Or, if you bring back an old one, there has to be a new angle. There's got to be something new he wants to do, and do it in a different way. So I always spent most of my time working on the villains.
A good hero is only a good hero if his villain is a good villain. The nature of comic books and of all heroes is that the villains have to be worthy of them. So as more heroes were created, more villains were created, almost by the nature of it. And the saddest hero is the hero that doesn't have good villains. The nature, what characters do you like? Well, I like Batman because he's got good villains.
It's the yin-yang, you have to have strength in both. And in fact, I think it's harder to create a good villain than it is to create a good hero. Because a good villain has to be very believable, but also very evil. And also, you have to make him a little sympathetic. He cannot be completely out there. Again, the more people can relate to the villain but realize that I wouldn't do that, I think the better the character you create. And so when you look at universes that have been around for 40 years now, Marvel and DC, you can name on one hand, the total number of great villains.
The Catwoman. The Joker. The Penguin. The Riddler.
Our first full-length motion picture feature in color opens a whole new world of thrills.
Who is this meddlesome fool who fights for them? Unless, of course, they can't fight for themselves. Of course. My bomb, the radiation, they've lost their powers. Finally, Reed Richards. On a silver platter.
Dr. Doom was something Stan Lee could get his teeth into. Made him a great, great villain. And Victor Von Doom was a scientist. He had an explosion, his face is destroyed. It was like Phantom of the Opera, puts an iron mask on. How could you not like a character like that? Dr. Doom is the greatest villain probably, maybe Galactus is even greater. Just think of the size of Galactus. Just think of the power of Galactus. Only Jack Kirby and Stan Lee could have come up with that. A person who devours planets. In my wildest dreams, I would have never created a character like that. That is beyond belief. And then to have the Silver Surfer roaming through space, looking for planets for his master to devour. Absolutely a miracle, strange character. Jack Kirby's imagination stands alone. He was so creative that he threw away more good ideas than most people have in their lifetime. If he ever threw anything away at all, I'm sure he forgot more good ideas than most people have. I think that explains Jack Kirby, the most creative force I have ever seen.
As far as superhero comics, he was a genius. And he revolutionized the superhero comics, as far as I'm concerned. We all learned from Jack. And I don't care who you talk to, everybody learned from Jack that working today. We all learned from Jack. We all got something from him.
Jack was very prolific. He was very different. He was the only artist I knew that would start at the top. And he would not rough out a drawing. He just started one line and finish off a drawing, which is amazing. I could never do that. And he was extremely fast. And he was different. Jack was very different. And I think you'll find that along the way for most brilliant people, you know. They were different. They stood out from the crowd. And Jack certainly stood out, you know.
When you turned the page, it exploded in your face, his drawings. His drawings was the tension in all his panels, everything, the expressions. And you could feel the energy on every page that he drew, everything. You could criticize it, you could say, well, the hands are wrong, the head, maybe he made the nose too small, maybe he made this. Doesn't matter. He could tell a story like no one could tell.
There was a certain nobility in all of Jack's characters. He had a very positive view of mankind. And he actually quarreled a few times with other comic book writers and artists who he felt had a much more negative view of mankind. I think that's one of the reasons that Jack was so good at doing superheroes, because his heroes, when they reached their peak moments of heroism, were truly beautiful people. They were well-drawn, they were strong, they were vital, and they were very energized. Everything Jack drew was energized, but especially the heroes when they were at their peak moments of heroism.
To be truthful about anyone influenced by comics, if you've been reading comics and drawing comics in the last 30, 40 years, you had to have been influenced by some contribution of Jack to comics. And Jack is that man for hundreds of characters. Chiefly, he designed the Fantastic Four, Captain America, Iron Man, the Hulk, the X-Men, the Demon, the list goes on. And I mean, he created one of the greatest majorities of superheroes that any one person ever has, and he would wind up being the most influential person on the entire medium of American comics.
The superheroes of American comics have managed to develop, adapt, and grow as characters. Some were created more than half a century ago, and yet they regularly embark on new adventures. Even though new characters have been created since, the older ones still spark the imaginations of young artists who have enriched the character's world with a modern vision, a fresh inspiration. Today, Bill Sienkiewicz, Dave Gibbons, Alex Ross, and others are the heirs of Siegel and Schuster, Bob Kane, or Jack Kirby.
These characters are elevated to the stature of being such icons that they're not necessarily the replacement of my gods per se, but I guess if the parallel were to an earlier culture where people spent that much time painting portraits of Jesus and the saints, it would be that kind of feeling towards the material. There's that level of respect, but then there's also a respect I have that's very knowing of what the original creators intended when they conceived these characters, and I always want to pay special tribute to what those people had done before. In every case of the superheroes I've worked with, I've re-examined them from the point of bringing out the original artist's works, and I want that to sort of infect my mind before I do my reinterpretation.
The comic book heroes have stayed around so long because they continually reinvent themselves. That's part of them having attained mythological status. Myths keep changing. And part of the way they keep changing is they keep being reinvented. Every so and so often, the reinvention is really going back to the beginning.